Joshua Weiss, aka Mr. Josh W. I am with Patrick Zarrelli, aka PJZNY, Patrick Z. Zarrelli, New York. You are watching another podcast, political discussion, roundtable between two on the other sides of the coin. If Pat was on one side, I'm definitely on the other.
I'm on the good
and
side.
we are with, huh?
I'm on the good side.
He's on the good side. I'm on the dark side, the red pill, the Matrix fighters, and Pat is what was that term again? The conservative,
I go with progressive.
You have a term.
People like to say liberal, but I go with progressive. I'm a progressive.
The aggressive progressive, which I've heard that's become a common thing, and they are getting more aggressive. Trans movement wants to start packing.
We learned from Donald Trump, buddy.
Yeah. Everything here is under the wonderful umbrella of SFL Media. It's Florida Free News. It's an incredible website. You have to check out SFL Media. There's no .com. .com is 1995. You have your AOL and your Netscape email addresses with that. It's .media, SFL Media. So make sure to check that out. And we got a lot of good things coming up in the future and whatnot. I put on the tie. My hair's getting long.
You're very, very handsome today, buddy.
Yes, thank you. I got Freddie back there. Coochie coo. So we were kicking around what's going to be our next idea. If you know Ruthless Politics, Google it. You'll find us, YouTube it. And we had a great show going then. And we're kind of continuing what we're doing. We were kicking around ideas. And one hot topic for everybody has been Ron DeSantis. Ronald DeSantis, and who is Italian, by the way, like our good friend Patrick Zarrelli. Full Italian. His last name may fool you. We'll get into that. But we thought he was going to be a topic on something we were doing. Then we realized, no, there's so much to discuss with this gentleman. We could probably fill an hour with it between both of us and all of our opinions. So I've done a lot of talking, and I'm going to let Pat start. But let's talk about, because, hey, remember, folks, we're also both Floridians, SFL. So we live in Ron DeSantis' state. We're not just talking about Ron DeSantis as an outsider. We live where he governs. So we have a kind of an insight that other people may not have. It's certainly more newsworthy here than it is in, let's say, Wisconsin. That being said, let's first cover his start and that razor thin election against Andrew Gillum. Do you remember? Did you vote during that? Did you vote for Gillum? And let's talk about how this guy even got here before we also hit on the Trump stuff, the Disney stuff, concealed carry now in Florida without a license, the migrant issue when he shipped them off. We're going to talk about the seaweed blob. A lot of people aren't familiar with. That's really, really dangerous. His war on the woke. And I'd like to add, what's this guy thinking internationally? One thing we don't know about this guy, well, we got a little bit of a thing, but we know what he wants to do with Florida. What does he think about the rest of the world? And that's something that's very important as he may run for president. So, Pat, let's rewind back. Did you vote for Andrew Gillum? Are you mad about Ron DeSantis being your governor? Tell us what's going on.
Well, it's really it's been a fascinating ride, hasn't it? It feels like we've lived 100 lifetimes with Ron DeSantis because he's done so much. I don't think as many governors have seized the reins of power, except for maybe the governor of Texas, Abbott, the way that Ron DeSantis has. He really wields his power like a heavy sword, and he is not afraid to use it. But he came from auspicious beginnings. As you remember, he was losing his race. He was not a front runner to be the Republican nominee for the Florida governorship. But then he started kind of jumping on the Trump coattails, and he was running ads where he even dressed his child up as Donald Trump.
Yes, he did. Big Trump.
And so people got behind him, and Trump got behind him because Trump would love to have an ally in Florida, and Trump loves anyone that loves Trump, right?
Trump lives in Florida.
It was a great marriage. It was a great marriage at first. And Trump gave Ron DeSantis enough boost to basically nudge out Andrew Gillum, who I did vote for. I'm a Tallahassee guy. I'm a Florida State guy. I'm alumni. And Andrew Gillum is big at Florida State. You know, he was a big name.
He was the mayor.
Before his fall from grace. Yeah. And so I totally supported Gillum, as did most people that I know. And I was fairly certain that Gillum was going to win. And I was floored when DeSantis won that first election.
Well, I could tell you what, when I went and pulled up the stats, that actually had an automatic recall. That was that close. According to Ballotpedia, this actually was a very close race. 4,076,186 for DeSantis, 49.6% to 4,043,723. Andrew Gillum, 49.2%. So when people talk about does your vote matter, this and that, it certainly mattered in Florida. That's a razor thin margin. And mind you, Rick Scott wound up winning for senator in a very razor thin margin as well in that same election. Florida had two very razor, both went to recalls, if you remember.
This is such a great point because here is where Florida turned into what people are calling now a red state. But if you really back it up, it was very close. People thought that Florida was turning blue, and we thought we were going to continue turning blue. And we did not think there was a chance of Rick Scott winning. He wasn't a popular governor. He'd been involved in Medicare fraud before he was governor. He won a razor thin election against Alex Sink when he first got the governorship. So we didn't think that he would win the Senate. And he was running against a former astronaut who was a very popular senator. So I was pretty
Bill Nelson, I believe, right?
Bill Nelson. I was pretty certain that there was no way he was going to knock off Nelson.
I think a lot of people, yeah. And this is, you're right, this is the beginning and the possibly solidification of Florida becoming more and more of a red state. And it's funny that you mentioned this because I looked this up when I tried talking about this with somebody else in a previous discussion. What was Florida's role in elections and how did it tend to vote? So interestingly enough, as Florida was starting to swing, it really is kind of a red state. And maybe people don't know this. So Barack Obama changed everything. It was the first time Florida had voted back-to-back Democrat. So they voted for Barack Obama in this state over McCain and Romney. But that's an anomaly. So both times Trump won. So red. Both George W. Bushes were voted in Florida. Clinton beat Bob Dole in the second go-around. That was a Democrat. But before that, when George H.W., the dad, went against Clinton, Florida went for George H.W. both times. It went Reagan both times. It did go for Jimmy Carter, oddly enough, against Gerald Ford. But Florida went Richard Nixon both times. Then there was a Lyndon Johnson, and then three Republicans, Nixon, Eisenhower. And the last time it was solidly Democrat, 4 election cycles in a row, was 1932, Roosevelt, and Truman. And so very interestingly, and then you had Herbert Hoover, and before that it was all Democrat. John Davis, James Cox, Woodrow Wilson.
But back then also the Democratic Party was kind of flipped too, probably with the Republican Party. But
and now we're going back into
what you're describing is that Florida is really like pop culture in a way, politically speaking. It really seems to be whoever can turn out the vote. When you talk about who wins in Florida, they're people that turn out the vote. You know, like Barack Obama could turn out the minority vote, or Carter could turn out the vote, you know, and then you get like a Ron DeSantis type, which is really Trump's, you know, push to turn out the vote that works. And it seems like in Florida, whoever can turn out, for lack of a better word, I'm going to say like the lower income part of Florida. If you can turn out the minorities, you can pull a Democrat. If you can turn out, you know, like the middle of Florida and all those like lower middle class white people, then you can pull the election there. And so it seems like whoever has like, whoever's the media darling can turn Florida. But that's also why I don't believe that Florida is really totally red. I think that Florida can swing anyway, because what happens is if people don't like the candidate in Florida, they don't turn out. And what happened when DeSantis went in is Trump had a huge wave. All those people in middle Florida and northern Florida, all those people loved Trump. They poured out. And so everybody that was on the Republican ticket got the benefit, including Ron DeSantis and including, you know, Senator
Marco Rubio. Yeah, no, it goes down vote. I mean, look, you're right. We have a solidly Republican. You're talking about both senators, the governor, and the last 2 presidential elections have all been Republican. So, yes.
And you have a Florida House that is wholly Republican with a supermajority. And that's who really provides Ron with his power. But I personally believe after this all shakes out, they're the one that are going to catch the brunt of Ron's like backlash, because he's going to skate off maybe into the presidency or some sort of presidential run. And those Florida congressmen that helped pass all these laws, they're going to have hard re-elections because their people in their district are going to be upset.
Well, it's also a question of, do people like what's happening in this state? This state has definitely become the most newsworthy state. This state has become now a bastion of people leaving California and New York in record numbers. Money people are coming to Florida. It's driven up the prices of everything. It's driven up real estate dramatically. People are overpaying for everything here. So this state was already semi-popular as a tourist destination and this and that. But for those who are seeking
warm water, there's a lot of reasons to move here, you know?
Oh, there's always been great reasons here. Listen, keep in mind, Florida was always the 3rd most populous state behind a New York, California, maybe Texas. It was 4. I think it's 3 now.
Yeah,
so it's always been a state people want to go to, the no state tax thing and all of that. There's many reasons to come here. And it's a peninsula. There's beaches on the whole, goddamn thing. But now it is dug into being known as the Freedom State. It's more Texas than Texas. There's a joke now. So it has become that. And I don't think it's going to stay that way forever because Ron DeSantis is going to be here forever.
It's a fascinating thing because if you're really honest about America, you're honest about politics, you're honest about where you live, you actually care about these things. And forget the fucking political parties for 1 second. You have to ask yourself, as a business owner, as a person, it's great to live in a red state. Like down here in Florida, with the way things are set up for business, it's better than being in New York. It's better than being in California. But
at this point, yeah.
I'm appalled at the things that Ron DeSantis does, and so it just creates a fascinating world if you're a Democrat, because you have to admit that there are some things inside of Republican economic, things that they want to pass and things that they want to do that are truly valuable and actually work. And so that's really part of the problem in the country is Democrats are unwilling to admit that some of the Republican economic policies are actually valuable, and or Republicans are unwilling to admit that Democrats are probably right on social issues. And I think that's kind of where
it seems like it's an all or nothing thing. We've really dug in now. It's all or nothing. You support it completely one side or the other. And that's really sad because you've even seen where people will speak up about one fragment of what you were talking about that they're in favor of. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, you're not unified with us anymore. You got to go. And it's really sad that we can't find even that. There is no more middle ground. There's no more common sense middle. It's just not. And we've always struggled, I think, to find that in politics. It does not exist anymore.
We have found it after wars at times. If there's like a big war like World War II or something, the country will come together and all the bullshit will subside. But we've been rich and powerful for so many years now. I just think that we're just fighting amongst ourselves because there's no other fights to have,
So really quick, a quick little thing about Ron DeSantis, so why is this guy so popular? One of the reasons he's getting all this talk is he's a governor of a popular state. B, he is thinking of running for president, and everybody knows that. And he's on a book tour where he's probably gauging where that's going to land for him. And there's been a lot of talk even about that, very lukewarm receptions to and whatnot. So he has not declared yet. So let's keep in mind that of the Republicans, he is not declared. He is not running as of today, as we're doing this podcast. He is not in the race. But really quick, just looking at the Wikipedia, this is an interesting. If you didn't know his politics, you would look at this guy and be like, wow, this is very accomplished. And he has an interesting background, perhaps even a Manchurian-type candidate, because it just seems he was groomed for this. By the way, his middle name is Dion, which I think is very cute. So military officer, 46th governor, born in Florida. So he's not a carpetbagger. He's actually from here. Went to Yale and Harvard. Say what you want about that. Was in the United States Navy, promoted to lieutenant, was part of SEAL Team 1, went to a joint task force in Guantanamo. I don't know if that's a good thing because there were a lot of problems there with how we treated
SEAL Team 1. Is that really real? I'd love to see the photos on that. I've never
served as an legal advisor to SEAL Team 1. Maybe I should have said
SEAL Team 1 in there, this fucking clown. I've never seen a picture of him with an M16 on the beach with the freaking.
No. He was Tom Cruise in A Few Good Men.
He's a jaguar.
Handle the truth.
I know somebody who went to law school with him, and they said that Ron was planning the presidential run back in law school, and he was talking in law school about how it's good to partner with insurance companies because insurance companies have the money to get you into the presidency, but are not perceived by the people yet to be evil companies because they, supposedly help you when you have.
Yeah, so I find them as evil as any.
And then fast forward, Ron just passed tort reform here in Florida, which pissed off all the attorneys because it favors the insurance companies. It makes it harder for the injured to sue the insurance company. And so that was Ron's partnership that he's been building since college to now help him go after the presidency. So when you say groomed, he has been planning this, and he did too. His military time and his schooling was chosen based on a political future. Maybe not president, but he was planning on entering politics. That's for sure.
It certainly seems like that. And
then he married a newscaster, and she's very politically savvy.
And he did a lot of attorney work. He studied at Yale. He was a baseball player at Yale, part of Delta Kappa Epsilon fraternity. He got a BA magna cum laude graduate from Yale. His military service. So he was in JAG. If you remember, there was a show called JAG. Stood for Navy Judge Advocate General. He completed Navy Justice School. He was at the Joint Task Force for Guantanamo. So yeah, this guy's was definitely inside
Guantanamo doesn't really have a great reputation. Somebody should dig into
Does
that.
not.
Somebody should also dig into who he dated in college, because the way that he treats Disney is very stalker, domestic violence-y, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's got some relationships in his past that are kind of toxic.
Wait a minute, we're gonna hit Disney good. Remember stalkery, domestic violence-y as a descriptive.
I coined those.
Stalkery.
Yeah.
You just sounded like a 12-year-old girl on Instagram.
Yep.
Domestic violence.
He has a lot of toxic, insecure masculinity about him.
Well, that's coming out. Now that's an interesting thing, because I have heard two other people that are Republicans that they lean Trump, and they're like personalities, whatever. And they went to one of Ron's book stops, and one of them is actually running for president. His name is Vivek Ramaswamy. Very, very intelligent guy, Trump guy, and he's an Indian fella that's running for in the Republican primary. And he went to one of these and he spoke as well, and he outshined DeSantis. And he went on record as saying that DeSantis' people pulled him aside and said, listen, if we're going to keep you on this thing, you can't outshine Ron. You got to tone it down a little bit. So that was number one. And another lady talked about how he just got a very lukewarm response. And when he doesn't get his way, he's kind of Trumpy. He's pouty. And he starts getting upset. I think this guy's starting to smell his own and he's starting to, his celebrity's getting to his head a little bit too.
We saw that a little bit when him and Biden met after one of the storms, and Biden kind of outshined him, and DeSantis didn't like it. And I've also seen other people comment that DeSantis has trouble at fundraisers, shaking people's hands, looking people in the eye. He kind of just wants everything handed to him. He doesn't really want to put in the work and effort. He doesn't really want to dig in. He just has super high goals, and he's going to run towards those as fast as possible, and the chips will fall as they may. And it's fairly reckless, on, I would argue, way to run your political future. I mean, he's really putting it all on the line for this election. If he doesn't get the Republican primary and he doesn't end up president, where is he? Because I'll just go down a brief list of things I'm sure we'll talk about. Don't say gay, right? Piss off the LGBT community. Abortion law, piss off all the women. Conceal carry, piss off all the people that are gun violence victims or, fans of gun laws. And then tort reform, pissed off all the lawyers. And then he's a no-show for the flood, pissed off everyone in South Florida. And then the Disney skewed, pissed off everyone that's like a Disney lover and anyone that owns a business in Orlando, because they thrive off of Disney. He forgets that he's attacking every business owner in Orlando every time he attacks Disney. You think the guy that owns the local Motel 6 there isn't throwing his phone against the wall every time he looks on social media and sees DeSantis attacking Disney?
It ain't going to help. I just wondered, Disney's one of those things that has just so many people, it almost doesn't even matter. It's just going to be, I don't think it's going to hurt their business one way or another, but Disney's ready for the
fight. Disney is Ron proof. They'll outlast Ron. They'll outspend Ron. They'll figure it out.
If there is a business that is anybody proof, Disney's one of them. Like if you had to pick 10 businesses, you probably should put Disney on that list. You're right. Yeah. That being said, so before we get into his presidential aspirations, and we can talk about that with the Trump thing with him, I want to hold off on that. And let's maybe start with the ones that are a little smaller that we can get through quicker. The seaweed blob, the shipping of the migrants, and concealed carry. And I'll make sure that we hit on those. Then we can get into Disney because that's a little longer. Okay. The abortion law, and then how he handled COVID, because that's what really put him on the map with the media and with outsiders of Florida was COVID. And we'll talk about that. So why don't you talk first about, let's get the seaweed blob out of the way here. What is the seaweed blob?
The seaweed blob is, I guess they call it seagasm or something like that. It's a type of seaweed.
Sounds cool.
Getting worse and worse every year. And if you live in Florida, you know that basically in the summer when Floridians want to use the beaches, not tourists, they've been completely ruined. It's impossible to swim without seaweed. The seaweed is laying all over the beach, and the seaweed has like sea lice in it and different things, and it's smelly. It's just everything you don't want in your beach day, right? And what infuriates me about it is that Ron has been sitting here with the seaweed coming every year and he has done nothing about it. And people are like, well, what can we do? It's seaweed. It's 550 miles of coastline or whatever it is. And all I have to say to you guys is, have you been to the Northeast in the winter? Have you been to Colorado? Have you been to New York? They plow every single highway of snow every single day. Why doesn't Ron have trucks going up and down the beach 3 or 4 times a day, like Zambonis, pulling all that seaweed out, maybe trucks that are half in the water, half out, so that like 30 feet of the initial water is totally cleared of the seaweed. If you can remove all the snow that falls all winter long on all the highways in Colorado, all the highways in New York, and all the highways on the complete upper end of the country, then you can sure as fuck handle the seaweed. The reason we're not handling the seaweed is because Dickbag is focusing on culture wars in his presidential election, and he doesn't give a fuck about us or our beaches.
Well, it is an interesting point. He clearly isn't making a priority. I don't pay too much attention to this, but it has affected even where I live with this red tide kind of thing and whatever causes all of this. And it is a battle that Florida goes through. And one thing you left out about this whole seaweed blob is not that it's just ugly and it makes it uncomfortable and things. And anybody who knows from seaweed should know this, but it's actually toxic. When I live fairly close to the beach where I live, where I'm in my county, we're very not far developed west. So even though I'm not on A1A, I'm very close to it. And when that starts getting close, you start coughing. If you live in that area, it's happened to me when I lived very close to the river on US 1, and I remember it in my lungs, and it is actually toxic. It is a problem for the state. It's a problem if you love the state, if you love the water. It kills the animals. Fish, manatee, everything dies in the wake of all this. It's toxic. And you're right. I mean, I guess if we can throw migrants out, we should be able to throw seaweed out.
That's what I'm saying, right?
That's a fair point. I don't know why he doesn't make this a bigger deal here.
We have a huge financial surplus. We have tons of smart people here. We can surely handle this seaweed problem. There's just nobody focused on it. And it's going to mess up Florida tourism because right now, people that are traveling here, they don't know that our beaches are screwed. But it's slowly going to get out. And those people that come down and they get a seaweed vacation, they're not going to come back.
Right. And, maybe one thing, seaweed on the head makes for a fun picture. But after that, it starts getting old. Yeah. So that gives you the seaweed blob. Now, we talked about the shipping of the migrants, and I think when you brought that up, it was the stunt that he pulled that also gave him a lot of media fare, which is when about a year ago, it seems like, he took a lot of the migrants that are coming to Florida. And the background of this is most of the migrants wind up in Texas. They wind up from the South, not all of them, but they basically wind up either coming in through California, which are more your Asian migrants, and then Texas, Florida gets some, and the South, and it's a thing. And a lot come to Florida. A lot of Latins and Hispanics come to Florida. So the theory was he was tired of his red state housing all of this, and blue state should have this. If you love these people so much and you want to give them tax dollars and this and that, why can't we just ship them to blue states? And that seems to be the crux of the argument. I believe he did as a publicity stunt to get his name out there, to get the media frothing, and to be talked about when you're going to run for president, to get a lot of, whether it's negative, all publicity is good publicity. He took one or two busloads of migrants, probably had the best day of their life, by the way, and shipped them off to Martha's Vineyard. Well, and then I'll let you speak on this because I know this got you steaming hot mad.
It does.
But wasn't it kind of funny, no matter what side you're on, is like, hey, drop them off in this really, really affluent area, and let's, almost like a reality show, what are they going to do? Let's see how they handle it.
It's funny in an ironic or like toxic sort of way. There's lots of things that are horrid that are funny, But the thing is that
fair.
I laughed. You know what else you have to mention at first is that Greg Abbott did it first in Texas, right? So as always, it's not an original Ron idea. It's Ron copying somebody else for attention, just like he did with Donald Trump and just like he does with everything, because he's not a man that's grounded and has his own ideas, his own goals, other than being president. That's the only thing I think that floats around.
What made you mad specifically?
So here's the deal. These are people. They are human beings. And here's what he did. These were not migrants in Florida. He went to Texas. And he went to Texas and he had a migrant that he paid there give McDonald's gift certificates to the migrants that were there so that they could get food. And then they used the McDonald's gift certificates to tease these migrants into a hotel that they had rented. And they stored all the migrants in the hotel until they could get enough migrants together to put them on the 2 private jets that they had. And then they shipped them up on the 2 private fucking jets, $12 million.
Taxpayer money.
$12 million on this whole.
I love this.
Yeah, and he ships up to Martha's Vineyard, and then he gives them this booklet which says like your guide to like becoming like a free person in Massachusetts, which was like total bullshit, and none of the stuff in there was accurate, and he just leaves the people there. I mean,
Yes.
it's inhumane, it's cruel, it's dishonest, it shouldn't be legal. I know that the people in Texas were saying that they didn't believe it was legal, and that Ron only did it once. He was going to do it a couple times, but he got a little bit of
I think he got scared. Well,
yeah.
if you can believe it, and Hillary Clinton is one of them. They were trying to find a roundabout loophole for charges for human trafficking
Right.
to put on this guy. Imagine that though. Like there's real human trafficking on. There's really like an 8-year-old boy who's in like a back of a pickup, a 16-wheeler who's going to get shipped somewhere, and they were going to get Ron DeSantis.
Ultimately, if you're a smart person, isn't this counterproductive? Because the U.S. government, here's what's going to happen. Lawyers have already stepped in. They're suing the government on behalf of these migrants. All these migrants are basically going to get free citizenship because they've been put through this horrendous ordeal.
Anyways, yeah.
And the government's going to be like, listen, instead of paying you guys because we've obviously wronged you, we'll just let you be citizens. They're all going to say yes. And so all Ron really essentially did is make them citizens, which is what he's supposed to be not wanting to do.
And half the citizenship from a Learjet.
Problem with Ron, that he's rudderless. He's not a man that stands for anything. He's not coming to us and saying, here, American people, this is what I want to change. This is what I want to do to make it better for you. What he's telling us all is, I want to be president. I'm the biggest asshole on the block. I want to be president, and I deserve it because I say so. And that's a fucking shitty platform.
Well, let's go. So from blobs to migrants.
Okay, I'm done with my
another sort of blob, which is an aborted fetus, and that's sad to say, because that's how folks that are so pro-abortion like yourself really look at this thing. It's just a blob in your belly. Let's talk about this. Just happened, so this is very newsworthy. Florida, as well as many other states, have after this whole Roe versus Wade turnover federally, a lot of states have gotten emboldened to strengthen their laws in Roe versus Wade. I think there's even 14 states you can't even get an abortion in, if I'm semi-correct on that, and please check that. But Florida has now limited it to, I believe, 6 weeks, correct?
Yeah. And I did my research. Most abortions are done at like 8, 9, 10 weeks. And that 90% of them are done before 12 weeks. So they're not done that late.
Thank God for that, by the way, if that's true, because that should be the case.
Well, what Roe v. Wade did, which is important to mention, because I think this always gets lost in the conversation, Roe v. Wade was a scientific answer that was kind of reached at the Supreme Court level, like a lot of smart people think about it. And what it said is a woman can get an abortion until the baby is medically viable. So as long as the baby is part of the woman's body, it can't survive without her, like it's a little pile of goop and it's just getting fed, then the woman can remove it. But as soon as, it gets a beating heartbeat, it can survive on its own. At that point, it's a life. And I think science backs that up. And at that point, you can't get an abortion anymore. And that,
did you know that there were states that pushed it past that? And that, what my feeling is what you saw here is a backlash against
Roe v. Wade, I believe, is the right answer.
Did some Democratic states push it over the line?
Yeah, it's a solved question that politicians reopened to keep everybody fighting. We have already been through this fight. We already reached a conclusion. It was a fair conclusion. And the only reason we're having this again is so that Republicans and Democrats can have us fighting and getting our attention.
Well, now you're hitting on a very valuable point. Now that's a side note now. Yes, get everybody arguing over topics and we'll never have any unity. And this is as major a topic as anybody, there is no unity. But are you willing to agree, even as somebody that's considered progressive, liberal, whatnot, that many states, Virginia being one, California being another, not only pushed it to the third trimester, literally pushed it to the day that before the birth of the child, you can have it aborted. And do you think that for some people...
Is that really true? Is that backed up? Is that...
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, please look that up. And that's, I think, what started happening.
Maybe just in certain medical situations. I don't think a lot of women carry a baby to...
I don't think so either, but it shouldn't be an option.
Yeah,
right.
It just, but what if they tell you that, your baby's going to have some...
Have the baby and give it up. I mean, and that's...
What if it's going to have some issue that threatens your health as the mother?
Right. I agree, but
again, so this is where you get with
that's
it.
That's a sliver of a percent.
You got to let women and their doctors make their own decisions. You just can't get involved. This is nothing for us to decide or politicians to decide or any of that.
Well, one of the things that has happened,
make these decisions.
Look, you've been with your fair share of women, okay? And let's say in a big city, you have a lot of good-looking women, a lot of good-looking guys. They're hooking up a lot. And I think this is happening everywhere anyways. What has started to happen in this country with the downfall of our society was that abortion was starting to become a prophylactic. If you really want to break it down to street tax, And as somebody, I don't know what your record is, and if you've ever asked a girl, but what's the record of a girl that you know of how many abortions she's had? What, like, that someone has told you? What's the highest number you've heard somebody tell you?
I'm sure that there's girls out there that have had 2 or 3 abortions, or maybe there's more. But here's the
Right.
thing. That's a Republican talking point. The Republican talking point is that poor girls are promiscuous and they get all these abortions because they don't want to pay for condoms and birth control. But if you look at the stats, the people that actually get all the abortions are middle-class white women. They're women that don't want to have another kid. They're women that are following their career, and they're the ones getting all the abortions. And the Republicans ran some stats. And what they found out is all the babies being aborted, or a large percentage of them, would be Republican voters. And they want to protect the Republican white vote because they feel like they're losing the country to minorities. And so one of the problems is Spanish people are pouring into the country, other minorities are pouring into the country, and white women are aborting all their babies. So that's really why they put the kibosh on it, is they're protecting the white vote. But also the reason,
yeah, that's a new one. I have not heard that. I think that
Google it. But the other reason they do it is because it's a perfect wedge issue. They can convince poor people to vote against their own economic interest because they will vote in front of for saving babies. You know, they'll be like, okay, well, Republicans want to tax me and they want to give themselves tax breaks, but you know what? They're saving the babies. So I'll vote.
Don't you think it's an interesting thing, though, that in this country, and again, how divided we truly are, that there's one segment of society, let's say 50%, that doesn't even look at this as a baby. It's like, it's more about the woman's choice. It has nothing to do with the baby. We don't even take the baby into consideration. It's just, if she wants to get rid of it, it's her choice. It's about the carrier. Baby schmaybe. And the other side looks at it totally from the baby standpoint of, this is a life. Forget that it's a voter. That's nuts. And we got to wait 18 years for that anyway. So who gives fucking 18 years? But this is a human being. These are typically, if you notice, most anti-abortion people are devout Christians or devout religious. You brought up the Latin vote. The Latin vote and Hispanic vote is overwhelmingly starting to go Republican. And that's one of the issues that's hurting Democrats with it, is they're family people. They don't get abortions in Mexico. They don't get abortions in Colombia. They don't get abortions in Brazil. They don't get abortions in Argentina like we do. The Latin people tend to be stronger Catholics. That's a fact. So theirs is more religious based as well. And that's why they're making inroads. If you Google this, in the state of New York now, officially, more black babies are aborted than are born. That just happened 2 years ago. That is an undeniable. Please, anybody watching this, Google that. It is a horrendous
But let's
thought.
Let's say that you force all these women to have these babies and you outlaw abortion across the country. What ends up happening? You create all these families that are broken.
You have another problem.
You poor people
I agree.
in poverty.
Well, you have a societal problem.
Yeah, you know, so you can't really force women.
Remember, these are unwanted children, Pat.
One of the problems you can't give us something that's inside of another human full human rights, right? Because
here's the thing. I think if we wanted to fix this, the adoption process is horrible. I think that if it doesn't threaten your health, and you've already gone into a third trimester, let's give it a number. If you've heard third, you have to have this baby. It will get paid for. You do not have to come out of pocket, whether it's taxpayer money or for the betterment of society, or we start foundations that pay for this. The baby and all that will be paid for, and it will be given up for adoption somehow, some way, somewhere.
Well, I mean, that would be
it doesn't hurt you. Is that fair by third trimester?
Sure, that's completely fair, but you know that Republicans will never support helping the babies. Republicans are all for saving the babies until they're born, and then they tell them to kick rocks. They're not going to give you like, time off.
That's all government.
They're not going to give you care for your kid. They're not going to give you free health care. They're not going to give you paternity leave. They're not going to give you anything. So, it's really, Republicans are very pro-baby until it's a baby. And then
you're right. But interestingly, you could say that progressives and liberals are anti-baby until it's a murder on death row, and they don't want anyone to have the death penalty, but kill the baby in the belly.
First of all, no one is anti-baby. What we are is we are pro-woman until it's a baby, and then we're pro-woman and pro-baby. That's what we are.
Speaking of pro-woman, this is a good segue here into Disney. Pro-woman. So you say that liberals and progressives are pro-woman. Well, we now have a whole new sort of woman, man pronoun to talk about. And that is what even is a woman, right? So someone would debate this with you of what even is that, and are we protecting them? Because it seems that trans now and the gay community has more rights than anybody, migrants, Americans, women, men, whatever. It seems like this is a huge topic for what really makes up less than without a doubt 10% of our public,
Oh
and
my God,
probably
talk about over coverage. Yeah, for the amount of people that actually
right.
represent.
We agree on that. That like this is nuts.
Yeah.
So I'm not as up on this as you are. The backup is
Just
this.
the over coverage that you mentioned, you could make the argument that both sides are hurting the trans community by the over coverage. You know what I mean? Even
Well,
if
it's also showing
the trans
that
community, by making them front and center in the news every night, the liberals aren't helping the trans community either.
no, and it's only making people angrier at them. Yes, they're not helping their cause. It's not helping anybody. You're right. So the Disney issue, and I'll let you start to expand on it, but let's just give a primer here. The Disney issue basically comes down to this. First of all, Orlando in general, if people don't know, is a very gay pride proud city. It is, if you had to list the 10 gayest proud cities in the country, Orlando is on there. So
where you had the Pulse shooting, so
right, we had the Pulse shooting. And so they have a very large LGBT gay community in Orlando. So that being said, Disney, who's the proprietor of the whole city, there is no Orlando unless there's a Disney, came out very vehemently with gay pride. Any legislation they're going to support goes that way. And Ron DeSantis, they said they called it the "Don't Say Gay" or "No Say Gay." And what it really boiled down to, and we can debate this as well, is he tried to put a law into place that said that teachers and instructors or anyone of some sort of merit that oversees children is forbidden to speak about homosexuality, their home life, their gay life, their bi life, their polyamorous life with children. And it was capped, if you can believe this, and this is what the fight was over, of kindergarten through third grade. At this point right now, a fourth grader to 12th grade, this does not stand for. This law did not cover. So even a fourth grader, their teacher can talk all about the vibrators and dildos that he has at his house with his boyfriend. Just so you know, that was the crux of this. It wasn't a gay thing. It was your teacher's freaky and wants to exude their sexuality for some reason. And I know you know this, that you probably had straight teachers your entire life, going way back when it was much more common. And none of them talked about their sex life with their husband, their wife. They just never brought it up. But now it became a thing. And that's what this was all about, the "Don't Say Gay." So I'm going to give you the floor.
That's not what it's all about. It's about promotion of Ron DeSantis. And you got to ask yourself, is it worth going through everything you need to go through to be the governor of the third biggest economy in probably in the world, at least in the country, right? And the things that you pass are things like "Don't Say Gay." Why are you even worried, if you're the governor, about the curriculum through kindergarten to third grade? How the fuck do you have time?
Well, you're getting into these children's minds.
Significant. Are you telling me, Ron DeSantis, that this is the best you can think of, that you wanted to lead to do these like insignificant, stupid things, and that's all you stand for? Like,
some people don't think this is insignificant, my friend.
Is, though. Like, first of all, I've never seen.
You want your third grader to hear about his teacher's dildo?
Nobody's talking about that. That didn't happen. But this is what happened. We opened up.
Tell us what this is.
We opened up the country to LGBTQ rights. And as such, some of the teachers and stuff, in a school book, it might show a couple that's two men or a couple that's two women. It's not saying, hey, here's a dildo, jam it in the woman's vagina. What it's saying is, hey, there's other types of relationships out there that might not be like the relationship your parents have at home. And it's a way of teaching kids at a young age, so it's just normal for them. It's not the main part of the curriculum, little tiny things here or there.
Just hit it on the head, so it's normal for them.
Now, listen, you can make it should be normal.
Should it be normalized?
Dude, there's been gay people in the world since ancient Rome. Do you think
should trans be normalized to a third grader?
You think ignoring
third or second grader?
You think if you don't talk about them, they're somehow going to go away? No, that's called discrimination, my friend.
No, but should we wait?
Welcome in this country. Yeah.
But here's the thing. Let me ask you this. All jokes aside,
going away.
We don't talk about heterosexual sexuality to a first grader. We never have. We don't. We don't talk about.
I had sex ed in third, fourth, or fifth grade. Somewhere along the line, I remember having sex ed, but I don't think these kids are getting sex ed. There's just teachers are mentioning it here, there, and I think it's a red herring that was made up by the right because they need these wedge issues to convince poor people and scare poor people even to vote against their own economic interest, right? And so this is just the latest and greatest thing that's not really an issue to just kind of piss off the poor whites to get them to pour out and vote for Republicans. That's honestly.
Right, so moving it forward, if that's what you believe. So how did this become a Disney fight? Because we now know the background. We don't agree on
exactly what happened. I'll give you the quote right now.
Right. This is how this started with Disney.
Disney criticized the limiting of teaching sexual orientation and gender identity in schools. And as a result, Ron DeSantis said, we view this as a provocation. So Disney, having their own political view, Ron takes as a provocation. These are his own words. So it just shows you what a toxic, insecure individual Ron is, that if somebody else has a different opinion from him, like me and you are great friends and have different opinions, he considers it a provocation or an act of war. And he said, we're going to fight back against that. And he signed a law that would have dissolved the Ready Creek in June 2023. So basically what ended up happening is, as soon as they did it, he tried to pull their district away from them. And he signed a law pulling their district away from the Ready Creek district. And so what you know about the Ready Creek district is Disney takes up a huge portion of land, as anybody that's been there knows. And so what Disney did back in the day that was smart, they let a few key, really loyal employees live on the land. So there's only like 12 people that live in this huge area because everybody else just comes and goes. So those people automatically make up the board for the area. So because Disney only lets these 12 people live there, they're the board for the area. So they vote Disney's way. So it was a clever little thing that Disney did, right? And it's been allowed to go on because Disney's the largest employer in Florida and the largest taxpayer in Florida. So it's not like they're not doing their fair share. You know what I'm saying? And so Ron went and he tried to pull that away. When he first tried to pull it away, all the expenses that go with that district would have been poured onto the local districts. It was like over $1 billion in expenses. So Ron screwed the pooch from the beginning with this thing. And so then he had to go back and he had to try to unwind it. And so what he did is he made it so that only the governor can pick the board in that particular county. So Disney had no choice and the people that lived there had no choice. Ron was going to be able to hand pick the board in the county. So then Disney went and obviously passed a law at the 11th hour to avoid all of that and give them contracts for like 30 years. And so then Ron had to go to the state Congress, which is, supermajority Republican and does whatever he wants. And he got them to nullify the law. And then Disney said, we still don't care, and threw their gay pride event. And so this is an active fight going on back and forth. Disney makes $25 billion a year. If they spend $1 billion tanking Ron DeSantis' presidential run or getting all of those Republicans out of the state Congress, which would be very inexpensive for Disney to do, then there's going to be huge fallout. And so I'm watching to see how much money and effort Disney puts into this, or if they just brush it off, because in a few years, Ron will be gone. New governor will give them whatever they want, no matter what party he's from,
And interestingly enough, when you say no matter what party he's from, and I don't know if this is a political thing where Trump thinks that this is a way to gain points, so he's going to spar with Ron on anything, but at this point, Donald Trump has gone and made comments that he's upset with DeSantis' role against Disney and to leave this whole thing alone, which will be interesting with how people feel about this in the state, because there are some people that have jumped off the Trump train, and we're going to get to DeSantis running for president soon. But yeah, this is even Donald Trump and Chris Christie, who I don't even think is worth mentioning. He means nothing in the landscape of anything. But those were two prominent people that have come out against DeSantis' role.
I saw Chris Christie come out against DeSantis, and I thought it was good. Chris Christie was saying these aren't Republican values that he's doing. They're not pro-business. It doesn't make a lot of sense what he's doing. It seems ridiculous. I thought Chris Christie provided an honest view of what DeSantis is doing. And what I'll tell you is this: Chris Christie may not be the president, but you put Chris Christie and Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis on that primary stage in a big debate, Donald Trump and Chris Christie will both run circles around Ron DeSantis. Circles.
Oh, I would agree with that. Yeah. Ron DeSantis seems uncomfortable in these situations, and he is scripted. He is a slick politician. Whether you like it or not, he is very slick and groomed, and that's everything I liked about Trump. Is that
he's a fucking lawyer. They think before they speak, and they put things together. And then his wife
is a lawyer, so yeah, that's a really good point.
And they feel like they're destined for the White House. My only question, though, honestly, is how the hell is he going to get into the White House? Because, like I mentioned before, and I'll mention it one more time. Don't say gay bill, piss off the whole LGBT community. Abortion law, piss off women rights activists. Concealed carry, push off gun protection law activists. The seaweed, right? That's also people that are involved in Florida tourism. And then he no-showed for the Florida flood, so he loses South Florida vote. Then you have the Disney fight, which pisses off families. Can he even win the state of Florida in a general election? I don't know that he can.
We're gonna get to that. If he made it to the general, that would be very interesting. To put a bow on the Disney thing, and this can tie into the war on the woke thing, I think the reason why he's seeing this whole thing through and what he's doing is it is the war on the woke. Disney, I think he feels from the people that support his side of this, is that Disney is as woke as anybody. They put out a tremendous amount of woke material, whether it's through Disney Plus, or these Marvel things that they're now a part of, or they own Star Wars now and this and that. And so through a lot of the programming, I think DeSantis has taken this to another level. I don't think it's just about Disney. I think it's about what Disney represents. And don't think Disney's not playing along with this. As soon as this came out, they put on a huge pride event. there is an overwhelming number of Disney employees that are LGBTQ. They lean that way. If you were one person is gay or bi and another person is straight, the straight person is not getting the job.
Well, I have news for you too. All advertising and all marketing by most American corporations, especially corporations that are entertainment-based corporations,
yes,
is subliminally advertised towards the LGBT community.
Yes.
There's a reason why
that's happening more and more than ever before.
There's a reason why you don't see hot babes in Budweiser ads anymore, because they did the calculation. See, American families, they don't spend the money on alcohol and going out and doing things, but gay couples do, because they usually don't have kids. They're usually dual income families with no children. So they go out, they drink more, they spend more, and they do more things. They're also usually business owners because they don't want to face discrimination in the workplace. So there's no corporation in the world that's going to choose, the MAGA community over the LGBT community, because the LGBT community outspends the MAGA community on these things. Like Bud Light came out, and the MAGA community was furious with Bud Light, and then Coors Light, right on the backs of that, they ran a huge pride campaign themselves. They didn't sign with the MAGA community. They went pride because they said, there's more spending over here. It doesn't make sense to go to this.
Literally just follow the dollar, which I mean, that's what demographics and all this is. I don't know if that's totally accurate, that that's a bigger spending power altogether, but you're right in terms of they have tremendous spending power. There's no doubt about that. How did Disney, something that was so geared to children, is this all about indoctrinating children again? Because this goes back to now the don't say gay.
Who do you trust? Who do you trust to set the culture? Disney or Ron DeSantis? I trust Disney, dude.
Well, it's not a DeSantis thing.
Disney puts thought into what they do. Disney can be sued. Disney works. If they spend $1 billion on a movie and people don't show up, it's a problem. Disney has their better finger on the pulse than Ron DeSantis does.
But let me ask you this, in all truth. Disney started out back in the day when it first was an idea as obviously something that was for families, right? For children. It's always been geared to children, families. Okay. And so that's predominantly who goes to Disney World. And obviously it's made a lot of money and it has its finger in many, many different entities now. But this started out Disney as an illustrator with Mickey Mouse and old movies, and then a theme park, to which it's way bigger now. But isn't it strange that something that was so geared to children and it was so family based, what we would call the nuclear family, mom, dad, the white picket fence and the 2.5 kids thing, and now it's turned into where they are a political powerhouse, LGBTQ, maybe the leader in the rights of that fight. I can't think of another company unless it's a total gay company, that's bigger or in the fight. They're certainly the biggest company in it. How did they make such a decision to become so politically active when are they alienating regular families? Do they care?
Regular families still Republican MAGA families still lining up to go to Disney because it's the only place like it. But here's the reality. A company is not an entity. It's not a political entity. What a company is a group of employees. And for Disney, their employees are musicians, performers, actors and actresses, and a lot of those people are LGBT community members. So maybe 30, 40, even up to 50% of their staff could be LGBTQ. So when this law was passed, and it was passed right in their backyard in Florida, they felt they had to stand up for their employees. So they made one little statement, and then Ron singled them out because, again, he's insecure masculinity, and he took them to the hill. And so Ron turned them into a political force. And now the real question is Disney going to turn the shoulder and just be quiet? Or is Disney going to put their $25 billion of profits a year to work? And
they're going to fight this all the way.
Are they going to become a real political force
thing where they owe it to that community to keep going?
Disney does Star Wars. Disney does every cartoon we grew up on. If Disney enters the political fray with their advertising ability, with their marketing ability, good luck, Ron DeSantis. Good luck.
Well, I already think they're winning that battle. They're already doing it. I think you're right. They could wait DeSantis out. They're not going anywhere. Their agenda's not going anywhere. And I think
have $1 million to spend for every $1 that DeSantis has.
This is bigger than Ron DeSantis. They're not going anywhere. Keep in mind that the reason this all started out as a fight from the very, very, very beginning was that Disney gets tremendous tax breaks in the state. Disney runs this state. They get to do whatever they want. They are the tourism bastion. Our beaches are great. St. Augustine's fun. But people are going to fucking Disney World. You know what I mean? And the bottom line is when it all started and the sides were then taken, Ron was like, I'm going to take away your ability to get all the perks that you got. And then this is now starting to steamroll from there. But this goes back. This is not a new problem. This problem's been going on. And I got to be honest, we can probably end that segment right there because it's not going anywhere. And like you made a good point, they just may wait out Ron DeSantis and then they'll go back to doing what they do. They're already doing one on a national level. They already have infiltrated everything.
Whoever is gonna challenge Ron DeSantis, the very first stop they're gonna go on their campaign tour to get financing money is Disney. They're going to go to Disney. They're going to say, I'm going to kick this guy's ass and I'm going to give you back all your shit. And Disney's going to be like, here's $10 million.
Well, we know, they're going to back whoever can take this, this guy out. And again, he's going to be gone soon enough, Florida. I hate to tell everybody, he doesn't run for president.
He shouldn't be doing what he's doing right now, because the Florida used to have a law on the books that said you had to step down from governor before you could do this presidential shit. But Ron had it changed with this super majority he has in the Congress so that he could sit as governor and run for president.
Right. And we've seen this before. Yes.
He had these floods in Florida and he was out campaigning.
Yes, no, and that's not a good look either. I don't like when Joe Biden didn't go to East Palestine until Trump said he was going. So it's never for a good look when there's a disaster that somebody who's supposed to represent doesn't show. So before we get to wrapping this up, and we're going to finish on his presidential run, which is not official yet, the one last issue that we can talk about is concealed carry. That just happened in Florida as well, passing it. I made a comment earlier that we're becoming more Texas than Texas. Now, while we don't have weed, it's only medicinal. So, that's one thing we don't have gambling. You can't get on DraftKings in Florida and bet on tonight's playoff game. You can't bet on UFC in Florida. Interestingly enough, for as free as all this shit is here. We only have medicinal. There's not recreational marijuana. But what we do have is starting on July 1st, it has now been passed. You can carry a gun, a pistol, anything that is a handgun in your purse, in your car. You don't need a permit. Why is this good or bad?
People aren't going to like it, but I'm going to say this is the result of Florida having dumb voters. Dumb Florida voters running around saying that they live in the freedom state when they don't have free weed, when they don't have free gambling. You can't even play roulette at the Hard Rock, $1 billion freaking building over there. They won't even let them have roulette table or craps table, but you can conceal carry a gun in the casino. I mean, come on, give me a break, dude. We have in spring break in Miami, it's a fucking Wild West. It's shootouts down there. There's mass shootings that we had.
Illegal guns, and that tends to be one sort of type of person.
We had the Parkland shooting, right? And then we had the Pulse nightclub shooting. There's been mass shootings in Florida. And to get conceal and carry in Florida before was so easy. You just signed up, they did a background check, and anybody could get it.
It was easy. And absolutely.
It felt like a good system. And I've talked to people who were part of that system, and they don't feel, even right-wingers, that this is a good move. It feels like it's making Florida unsafer. It feels like Ron did it just because of the political points and with zero thought in mind. And I feel like this law is going to get people killed. And the people that get killed from these concealed carried weapons in nightclubs and other places when shootings are going to break out that wouldn't have broke out before because they wouldn't be able to hide the weapon and get it in, those deaths are going to be on Ron DeSantis. And so I think that Ron DeSantis, with this law and other laws, he's piling up so much bullshit behind him. I don't understand what he's doing. He just could have been here, helped out with the seaweed, showed up for the floods, done a few little good things, and probably coasted into the presidency. But it seems like the biggest danger to Ron DeSantis' presidency is Ron DeSantis.
Well, it's not. It's Donald Trump. But that is a good point. Ron DeSantis is that's probably the second reason. No, Donald Trump. So why is Donald Trump enemy number one? Well, let's and we can wrap up with this. I know we've been taking a lot of time here, and thanks everybody for watching. SFL.media hosting this podcast. Again, Ron DeSantis is not in the running as of today. He has not declared. That being said, the thought is he is going to declare. And I had this conversation with many people, and I thought, wow, everyone thought a Trump DeSantis ticket would be a no-brainer. And we thought that was a winning possibility if that's the side that you're for. And I started telling people, I don't think that's going to happen. There's egos at play here. And then we started hearing how Donald Trump was upset that Ron DeSantis didn't give him enough credit for his victory in Florida and his victories even before that Trump had backed him up on one for agriculture and whatnot. And when he was keeping his eye on Florida, because again, Don's a Florida resident. And so his big stipulation was to DeSantis, you have to pull your name out of the running. You can't stay in the running or you're stabbing me in the back, in so many words. So Trump in his ego and big-headedness already was upset that he didn't feel he got the pat on the back. Okay. And the thanks for making me governor. but he really didn't like that DeSantis wouldn't take his name out, which as of now he still has not done. So it's created a rift. There is no DeSantis Trump ticket. It will not happen. My question to you, and I'll let you speak on this, is A, who do you dislike more? Because I know how you feel about Trump. B, who do you think would win if DeSantis puts his name in the hat? And what's your opinion on him running and whatnot? And how do you feel in regards to Trump?
Man, it's so fascinating because it's a really complex issue when you ask who is better or worse. You know what I'm saying? Because they're so different, but yet so the same. One, I think it's hard for DeSantis to overcome the person that made him, right? There is no DeSantis without Donald Trump. So how do you overtake him, without greatness? Like, it's like Michael Corleone was probably the greatest Godfather. He still didn't outshine the Godfather. It's so hard to outshine like your own father or the person that made you. And DeSantis's whole political life is Trump. So how does he go in there and say, I'm better than Trump, when the whole reason I'm in office is because I pretended to be a little Trump? I think the best nickname that Trump could give DeSantis would be Little Me. He should say, oh, that's Little Me. And then that would be so good. But
right.
The complex question is who's better, right? And so it's weird because Trump, I believe, because he sticks to traditional Republican economic things, I think Trump would be better as a president. But Trump scares me because I don't trust his allegiance to Putin, and I don't know that he is not somehow leveraged in some weird way. So that's what really, freaks me out about Trump. But DeSantis freaks me out because DeSantis just does whatever he can do for power, and he just does whatever he can do for his allies. DeSantis is not a grounded man. He's not a man with a mission or a man with a pedestal, so to speak, or a platform. And that freaks me out. I like a politician that tells me what they're going to do, even if it's not on my side. I like them to say, here's what I'm for, here's what I'm against, these are what my plans are. And Ron never does that. He's just fights, whoever little comes around, does little publicity stunts. He's just kind of like a very weaselly, lame, small-minded kind of politician in my mind.
One thing that's happened here is they were neck and neck. Trump got indicted and he jumped 24 to 26.
There ain't no catching him now, dude, because Trump's going to catch other indictments, and we've seen what happens when Trump gets indicted. The people rally around him. And the other problem is, for DeSantis to beat Trump, he would have to be on offense 24/7, and he's already waited too long to attack Trump. So if he waits all the way to the debate to finally start speaking up, he's not going to have his voice and his wings about him, and Trump will have already beat him into submission a million times over.
Here's one of the things that happened.
Already too late to the fight.
Here's one of the things that happened that I heard. First of all, Karl Rove is backing Ron DeSantis. Karl Rove is not backing Trump. Jeb Bush and the Bush family is backing DeSantis. So he's already a Bushite. And that even goes back to the Yale connection.
One small comment there. Susie Wiles, who was a DeSantis right-hand person, she left. DeSantis fired her, tried to run her out of Republican politics because supposedly Susie Wiles was sending information to the Trump campaign. And now the Trump campaign has hired Susie Wiles, and she was basically an insider for a long time in the DeSantis campaign.
Well, that's dirty politics. I mean, I'm sure that's going on everywhere.
Roger
Stone, dirty.
On her says, Roger Stone says, Susie Wiles knows where the DeSantis bodies are buried.
So there you go. So Trump made a power play there. No, but that's dirty politics. Like Roger Stone said, I mean, you're allowed to get as dirty as you want. That this is about power.
And then Trump said he will not hire anybody off the DeSantis campaign. He said DeSantis is not going to be the candidate, and anybody that works on the DeSantis campaign will not be allowed to get a job on the Trump campaign.
Unless you have really great inside information. Right? But here's the thing. DeSantis, so there's already now a split in that he's starting to get tarnished with the term that he's an establishment Republican. And even though, yes, he was Tea Party, and he helped start and he was part of that little council or whatnot. So he got his feet wet early on, being on the fringe of the Republican Party. And that's what kind of got him where he is even now. Even though when you're starting to run for president, you're starting to become more establishment. The bottom line is that's going to rub some people wrong. At this point right now, the theory was that these indictments are supposed to keep Trump from even running. So that's where we're waiting. And I think DeSantis is waiting to see how that door opens, because this isn't just about indicting Trump. This is about the domino effect of affecting his ability to run or his ability to even campaign in the future.
There's zero chance that they stop Trump from running, because one, it'll look too political. It'll look like a banana republic. Two, the Democrats think they can beat Trump again because we beat him last time. So there's not really a big, fever.
Right. And they're hoping this hurts him, the indictment that leads to that.
And if Trump stands in the way of DeSantis, who's a scarier candidate for Biden because he's younger and maybe has a better, public appeal than Trump, then they're certainly going to let Trump stand in the way. Because if Trump beats DeSantis in the primary, it kind of kills two stones. Because what Democrats or progressives like me figure, Trump beats DeSantis, then he loses to Biden, so we maintain power. But also, where does that leave DeSantis? He started all these culture wars. He pissed off all these people. He abandoned Florida. Then he goes in the primary. He loses to Trump. Where do you go from there? He's a lost political soul at that point. So DeSantis has bet it all on this presidential run, and it ain't going to happen for him. Not the way it is right now.
I think it's not going to happen. I think Trump has too big of a lead.
Yeah.
I think that that what's going to happen, and here's my prediction. I don't think that DeSantis is going to run. I think he's going to see that Trump has too big of a lead, and he just needs to wait out one term, because Trump already had his one term, and that's if Trump wins or Biden or whatever. Trump's done at that point. So he's going to wait this cycle out. I really firmly believe that. He doesn't need to be a VP to get the notoriety. Everyone knows who this guy is. Mike Pence needs to be a VP for people to even know who he was. So that helps him. He's got no prayer either. He's talking about running. I personally believe Ron DeSantis waits this out, and in 4 years, and it's not knowing what's going to happen with Biden, but we're not going to talk about that. 4 years, absolutely guaranteed, will be a Gavin Newsom, whether he's the VP or the nominee, against Ron DeSantis, whether he's the VP or nominee. And I'm thinking they're both going to be the nominee. I think you're going to see a Newsom-DeSantis battle after this one. I think that he realizes that it would tarnish his legacy if he tries to run against Trump and gets beat handily this go around for his next go around. So just back out now.
He will absolutely get wiped with Trump, and he will get damaged in that race. There's no doubt.
We agree on that. We agree on that.
There's no hurting Trump. He is Teflon, and he will demolish DeSantis.
It seems to be with the people that are voting on that side.
He will say so many things about DeSantis and his family, it'll be endless. But I don't think it's a lock for DeSantis that ends up happening, because let's say Biden beats Trump, right? Then Biden goes off into the sunset or whatever happens with him. Trump is still young enough that he could run a third time. And who's going to stop him?
No, I mean, he seems like that's very possible. I mean, it's very possible. Who's going to stop him? Yeah. It's sad to say, a bullet or prison, because that seems like that's what it's going to be.
Never going to put a former president in prison. And then also, if he goes up against Gavin Newsom, good luck. Gavin Newsom is probably the best the Democrats have. He's a seasoned politician. He has way more experience.
Right.
He's better.
Well, I'm not saying he would beat Newsom, but I think that's what you're seeing, the grooming of those two.
Yeah, Newsom brings California, New York. He has a potential to pull Florida.
No, he's young and fresh. So if you're a Democrat and you're
has the ability to hold Ron accountable for all Ron's dumb shit, which has never happened before. But Newsom will hit him on every little angle.
They're the antithesis of each other, and they're young men. This is what everyone's wanted. Stop with the old men. Stop.
It would be a great race. Honestly, sign me up for that race. I would just love to cover that race.
Well, remember I said that will be in the next go round after this one. I think it goes young. The only crux to that is Michelle Obama, if she decides to run, and maybe Newsom becomes the VP to her. If you want to win, that's maybe where you turn. One of the things that really separates, and maybe we can close on this note, one of the things that nobody knows truly with DeSantis as well that's going to hurt him is his international policy. And understandable. He's the governor of Florida. He doesn't need to comment on what's going on in China. He doesn't need to comment on what's going on with the Ukraine war. It's not what he's there to govern. He's there to govern a state. But if you have political aspirations to presidency, we do need to know where you stand on that. Certainly, if you're going to run, we need to know where you stand on that. So he hasn't done that yet, except to a degree. He does back the Ukraine war.
But not a blank check.
Say again?
He said he supports it, but not a blank check.
Right. Well, and I think that's fair, because
that's reasonable. Listen, the one thing I'll give Ron DeSantis, if Ron DeSantis in charge of the military, go ahead, let him have it. He has military experience, he has military legal experience, and he's aggressive as hell. And I've learned from the Middle East wars that when the U.S. pulls back, the world turns to shit. And I believe Ron DeSantis would be the most aggressive military leader the U.S. has ever sent. He will be sending SEAL teams everywhere. He will take out anybody who even says anything bad about him. You put him in charge of that Ukraine war, you just watch. F-22s will be flying, F-35s. he might not want to give him.
Sounds like that's what you want.
But he's a
You
guy that loves power and he loves kicking ass, and he will let it fly.
And that's very possible. But that goes against.
And he's not going to give Putin any quarter, because Ron DeSantis don't give a fuck about Putin, because Putin didn't buy him a golf course.
No, and again, it would be important to know what he thinks about Putin and what he thinks about Taiwan and what he thinks about China, what he thinks about the Middle East. What's your role with Saudi Arabia? What's your role with Iran? This is all very important stuff. We know how broken on all of this now.
America. We don't know any of this stuff about Ron DeSantis. Just shows you.
We don't. And I think, and we can leave on this note. I think we've done an hour, and thank you for your time, everybody. Again, SFL Media, Patrick Zarrelli, Joshua Weiss here, the former Ruthless Politics guys, doing another podcast. And hopefully you're getting a good primer on this Ron DeSantis, if you're on the fence about him, if you're pro-Trump, if you're a Democrat, and giving you an idea of both sides here. I know Pat wouldn't vote for him. There was a time I considered him. I wouldn't consider him now against Trump at all. Would I consider him in a general? Of course, I would vote for Ron DeSantis over Joe Biden, but I don't feel as wild about Ron DeSantis as he's coming under the spotlight. And again, we just don't know internationally where he stands, and that's very important. And I think the media needs to start putting his feet to the fire on that, especially if he declares. We need to know he seems to be pro-cryptocurrency. He's against the central bank digital currency. He's chimed in a little bit about the economy. We also need to know where he stands on that. The economy is very fragile. Is there going to be bursts in the housing market, in the dollar? The dollar's weakening, the BRICS nations. It's very topical. So I think there's some things we need to learn about DeSantis outside of the woke bullshit.
There's also the question, if DeSantis becomes president, does he continue on this war on woke, or is the war on woke over then and he governs for the people because he's accomplished his main goal? So I think that's a big question. If you're telling me I'm Ron DeSantis, I'm going to go in and I'm going to attack transgender people and I'm just going to make everybody who's a minority and already has a hard life harder, then that's going to be a tough sell. If he can get into the presidency, or at least get into the presidency race and kind of put the war on woke behind him and start to lead for the middle of America, then Ron becomes a very hard politician to beat.
That's a very good point. I think we can wrap it up on that note, folks. Ron DeSantis, in about an hour, you got a good primer on this guy. Doesn't seem like he's a terrible bad guy, but he does seem like he's kind of a little slick and a little, groomed for this and made for this. And it seems like he's taking on what I think he thinks his state wants. People seem to be very happy with him. This is why we're even talking about him. We dedicated a show to him, and why he is very polarizing, because he is a standout character. If you ask the average American to name 5 governors, they couldn't do it. They probably couldn't even name who the president was, but that's a whole nother story. But DeSantis has put himself in that spotlight of a governor that everybody seems to know, for better or for worse. And you need that if you're going to run for president. I think we both agree on that.
Absolutely. All right. Let's everybody.
Yeah. Another great episode. Closing out. What do you want to say?
I would say everybody check out SFL Media. We've got a lot of great stories on there about Ron DeSantis and all these different things. We've been covering Ron the whole time. So we have an article about all the different things that we covered if you want a little bit of backstory. And I would just reiterate that everyone should really keep their eye on this primary, because the Trump DeSantis battle is probably the most exciting thing that's going to happen in this presidential run.
That's going to make for a fun debate if they stay if he does declare and get in this primary. So I thank you again. Another episode in the books, and tally ho.
All right. Bye, my friend.
Take care.